Hi, thank you so much, Jackie, for that great introduction. I'm really happy to be here and I'm grateful for everybody that joined. I have a lot of different things that I want to jump into. So I guess I'll just jump right into it. I am going to share a PowerPoint, but I did try to keep it very brief. So most of it is just going to be me talking. I'm not going to overwhelm you with a lot of words on the PowerPoint. And we'll get through as much as we can on there. And I'm going to try and leave about 20 minutes or so at the end for questions. So again, if you do have any questions along the way, make sure you add those to the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint here. Does that look okay for everybody? Okay, great. So we'll jump right in. So the key thing that I want to start off here is the general idea that I usually talk to parents about, not even specifically to this very difficult topic, but just in general. I think that sometimes as parents, it feels like you want to protect your child from experiences, from difficult things going on in the world, difficult things going on in their life, big emotions, sometimes what people can categorize as bad emotions or strong feelings. And I like to shy away from that because all emotions are important and are valuable and are telling us something that's going on in our body, something that's going on in our environment. And so I like to categorize those as just uncomfortable feelings. And sometimes we want to protect children from those altogether. And it's not about making your child's life easy. It's not about shielding them from those things. It's not about shielding them from intense emotions. It's about feeling it and working through the feeling and supporting them so that they can work through it either on their own or with support from you. So it's about modeling to them and showing them that they can deal with hard things too. It's not about avoiding it in the first place. And so it's really important to create a really safe environment and an open environment. Something I like to say to parents is, you need to be listening to listen, not listening to respond. So as your child is talking through what's going on for them, don't think about what you're going to respond as they're talking. I promise you're not going to forget. If it's important enough, it'll stay in your mind and you'll be able to touch base with them once they've really completed talking through what they need to talk through. So again, listen to listen, don't listen to respond, really listen to their concerns, make sure you're validating what's going on for them, even if for you it might seem like something illogical or doesn't make sense or doesn't align with your thoughts or feelings. So that's really the underlying theme throughout all of this. And again, applicable to this very specific topic, which is difficult to talk about, and also just in general in touching base with kiddos. So again, we were talking about this a little bit at the beginning, but what we're going through is really a global pain. It's like a collective trauma. And adults are barely coping with everything that's going on. We were talking about how a lot of people are burnt out. They have their emotional bandwidth is just run out. They don't have as much empathy as they might have because it's something that we call empathy fatigue. You're overwhelmed, you're sad, you're scared, frozen. And if adults are having such a hard time with all of this, and this is shaking all of us to our core, we can only imagine how amplified that is for our children. So modeling that you can go through this experience and you can still be okay and be there for them is really, really important. It's really important to stay connected and bring each other together and support each other through this rather than avoid it, even if we're scared that it might be a lot for our children. So leading by example, this is something I was touching on a little bit. So it's holding two things that might seem opposite to each other. You can be scared, you can be sad, you can be overwhelmed, you can be just uncomfortable and fearful, and you can still be there for your child, and you can still talk to them, and you can still be there for them. You can be not okay and sad and have a conversation with them and support them through all of this. So of course, your child seeing you hurt on a regular basis and overwhelmed on a regular basis, that can lead to something that's a little bit more problematic. But every once in a while, it's okay to show your child that you're also not okay sometimes. You also have a lot of emotions. That's modeling for your child that You can be scared and you can have uncomfortable feelings and you can get through it just like they can. So jumping. So the one thing that I'm going to touch on a little bit later, as I talk about different age groups, I'm going to touch on this when we talk about teens, because we know that they're exposed to just as much as we are. Navigating the news is really, really important. So firstly, if it is possible, limiting the amount of exposure to media coverage for yourself too, and also for teens. You want to stay informed. You want to know what's going on, especially teens and even tweens. They want to know what's going on. They have access to social media, but it's about staying informed rather than constantly exposing yourself to really traumatic images, traumatic stories. Sometimes we think that it's just the image itself that can be really traumatic, but even just hearing a story or hearing someone talk about their experience can be just as hurtful to our core as an image itself. So talking to your child about limiting exposure to these types of images. And again, also for yourself, because that can really get to us in a way that can, again, is like this collective trauma that we're experiencing. So looking out for reliable news sources, I'm going to put up a slide in a bit that talks about how to identify misinformation. I know that's not directly related to this topic on how to talk to children, but I think that it is connected because this is a great opportunity to talk to your teenagers about how to identify misinformation in general. This is a great opportunity to highlight how much misinformation can be seen online. And again, that's related to any topic. So I'm not going to go through the details of this. I know that the recording is being, the talk here is being recorded. And so I just thought, I saw this and I thought it was really, really handy, just information for parents to have in their back pocket on how to talk to their teens about things that are going on in general. And so you can go back and look at the details of this slide at another time, but it's really, really important for us to be able to be knowledgeable when we're talking to our kids about what's going on. So this is for yourself and for older kiddos that have access. So first things first, validating and supporting. So the first circumstance that really comes to mind for me is a child that has experienced grief before in their life. And this can be a really like re-triggering emotion for them, something where it's reminding them of the previous grief that they have experienced. And again, sometimes as parents, a parent will look at their child and say, well, I don't want to bring that up because I'm scared. I'm kind of like placing it in their mind. What if it wasn't there before already? Most of the time, they probably were thinking about it already. Or it was sitting in their unconscious, it was impacting their behavior, it was impacting the way that they were feeling. And as a parent, it's your job to identify that within them. So talking about, hey, I know there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot of innocent people. And again, this would be for older children, a lot of innocent people being killed. I want to check in with you. Is that bringing up big feelings for you? What is that making you think about? I just want to touch base with you and see where you're at. And again, it's not about being scared of, I feel like I'm putting that in their mind and they weren't thinking about that before, because it's opening a space for them where they know, oh, this is safe to talk to my parent about this. I can bring this up. This isn't too scary or inappropriate, or I'm burdening them. You're opening the space for them. So that's really, really important. Don't minimize fears. So sometimes children's fears can be, to you, seem excessive or out of proportion. And again, it's staying with your child and validating the anxiety, the sadness, the fear of whatever it is that they're experiencing, even if for you it doesn't seem like appropriate or doesn't really make sense to you. But starting a conversation is really the most important thing. And again, in any conversation that you have with your child, especially younger children, even if they have really advanced verbal skills, being able to verbalize emotion is a separate skill. And usually that takes a lot longer for children to develop compared to just verbal skills in general. And so it's your job to identify their emotions for them. Kind of like this idea when you've had a really anxiety-filled day, or you're really sad about something, and just saying the words, I feel really worried right now, or I'm feeling really sad about X, Y, and Z right now. Even just saying that, sometimes you just like feel your shoulders drop and you feel a little bit better because now it's outside of your body and not within you. You need to do that for your child. So it's saying, hey, I think there's something going on with you. Your body is telling me that maybe you're having some big feelings right now. I wonder if you're feeling sad about X, Y, and Z. I wonder if you've heard about, or I'm wondering what you're thinking about. I'm wondering if you heard something at school today, and just encouraging that dialogue, opening up the dialogue, and then identifying that emotion for them. And again, it's not about assuming that they should be feeling any way. Let's delete should from our vocabulary because there is no should in this situation. I hope that makes sense. So in approaching this type of conversation with your child, number one, regulating your own emotions, and number two, finding out how much they know. I think those are the first two steps that any parent should be taking in talking about this. Because one, children are very, very good at reading our energy and where we're at and how regulated we are. And if you're approaching the conversation feeling really, really uneasy, that might not be a great time to bring this up with your child. You want to make sure that you've processed it on your own, you've talked about it. Of course, you're not going to be 100% regulated because, as I said, this is like a collective trauma that we're going through and it is ongoing. But at the same time, you want to make sure you're at somewhat of a level of being regulated because you want to make sure that the conversation goes smoothly and you're supporting them rather than them feeling like they need to support you because you're feeling really scared or really worried. And then again, second, finding out how much they know. In this day and age, kids have so much access. Kids are younger and younger, have access to social media. And even if your own child doesn't have a phone, their friends probably have a phone and their friends are talking about things. They still have access to social media and the news and just being online in general. So don't assume that your child doesn't know anything. They could just be hearing things from friends, teachers. Maybe they're watching you watch the news. They're watching you have conversations with other people and you're like, oh no, I was in the other room. Don't assume. Children are like sponges. They absorb everything around them. And so you really have to assess how much they know so that you can dive in and say, and clarify anything. Because some things they might overheard in like little snippets of things here and there, and they try to put those pieces together and it's not necessarily accurate, or it sounds like something way scarier in their mind because they haven't put those pieces together in a correct way. So starting off with just curiosity is the number one way to go. These are just some examples on how you can bring up the conversation. Again, making sure that you're really regulated and you're in a space that you're feeling comfortable talking about this. And these are just general phrases that you can tailor to any age group. And again, I'll jump into different age groups in a moment. But, you know, have you heard what's been going on in the world? Really, really general, and just leave it open for them. You can be a little bit more specific if that's something you're comfortable with. You could just say, hey, I think you've probably heard about, there's so much going on in the news and a lot of things happening. I know that I had really big feelings when I heard about it, but I'm happy to share those with you, but I kind of want to see how you're feeling first. And then you can also open it up to, I'm happy to talk about this right now with you. We could save it for a later time. I'm here whenever you're ready to talk about it. Again, creating the space, and it's there and you're there, and whenever they're ready, they can enter it with you. So that's just some introductory ways to talk about it initially. Another thing to actually, sorry, let me switch the slide first. So for younger children, first, young children, especially under the age of 6, can sometimes see the world as revolving around them. It's something we call as children being egocentric, right? For them, it is very valid that the world revolves around them and things happen because of them. And so they maybe could also have prevented this in some sort of way. Any so like your imagination can really run wild with what a young child can perceive about this. Their imagination is so much stronger than ours that sometimes parents feel like with this very young age that if they don't bring it up, their child can't think up these really scary things. But sometimes what's going on in reality is actually less scary than what's going on in their mind. And so if you address it, it's actually reducing the fear. And so you can keep it really, really general and saying, there's something going on. You can explain. I put a little thing in the PowerPoint here on maybe a little bit of description on like what war is and what it means when people fight. And sometimes that means people hurt other people. And then also putting something in there and saying, that's happening very, very far away from us, and you're safe. Your body is safe, I'm safe, we're together, and really validating that piece. And then again, validating for them, this is not something that has to do with us. And opening the space for them to be able to express something like that. Like, did I do something? And then being able to validate that and clarify for them, because again, young children have very, very strong imaginations. And again, also with young children, you could potentially even look at a map together if they're very concerned about their own safety and how close this is happening to them, and show them that it actually is far away from us, and their body is safe, even though their feelings might not feel so safe right now, and just validating that. Okay, next is school age children. So this is more like elementary school aged kiddos. You can give a bit more detail, because again, even elementary school age, if your own child doesn't have a phone, they're still exposed. They still are hearing other people talk about it. Again, they don't need to be, you do as much as you can to prevent them from seeing any images, hearing any stories, but also, again, I'm wondering if you heard anything, figuring out how much they know. And you can give a bit of background. Like a couple weeks ago, there was an attack, and this war has been going on for many, many, many years, and there's innocent people being killed. And that's why you have so many grown-ups around you that are feeling sad. You have a lot of grown-ups around you that might be feeling distracted. And a lot of people are just feeling a lot of big feelings right now because there's just a lot of hurt going on in the world right now. And again, the validation that this is far away from us. But again, a bit more detail. They can start asking you questions. They might be starting to ask you some history. Why is this starting? Why is this war even happening? And the key here is you don't have to know all the answers, but you do have to be open, right? You can be open to exploring together. You can be open to saying, I actually don't know. I'm going to look into that a little bit. And I'll get back to you. Modeling the I don't know is also a very valuable experience for children at this age. So again, you don't have to be a historian, but you have to be open and flexible and willing to answer their questions. And potentially, even if some of those questions or some of those answers might not 100% be aligned with what you're thinking. And again, here you can address your own emotions, model, like one of the first things that we talked about, that you can be sad, you can be overwhelmed, and you can still be there for your child. Tweens. Tweens are basically teens, but just not quite yet. So this can be kind of this like 9 to 10-year-old to about 11 to 12-year-old age. And this is where it would be really, really important to ask what they've already seen, ask what they've already heard, and be really explicit about that, because at that age, it's very, very likely that they have seen a lot. Again, get a lot of information about what they already know and ask them what they've heard from their friends, from their teachers, from other grown-ups around them. And again, with this, you can get into a little bit more detail about, what exactly happened. But you don't have to get into detail about images, specific stories. It's again, just this generality of there's this war going on. A lot of innocent people are getting hurt. And again, that's why a lot of adults in your life are very sad right now and very distracted right now. And again, with this age, I think with tweens and with teens, just like how I was saying, it's okay to not know the answers to all the questions. I think at this age, also okay to research together. And this can be another one of those opportunities to identify information that you think is valuable, not biased, and valid together as a team to build these skills with them, because they are going to be in the world of social media, even if, again, if they don't have a phone themselves, or if they already do, outside of the context of this conflict, they need to be able to identify misinformation that they see on the internet, because there is so much of it out there that's so, like, kids are just being exposed to on a daily basis. So researching together can be something that's valuable at this age as well. The last group is teens. With this group, I would assume that they already know. I wouldn't try to hide any information from them. And this is where you can engage in some pretty deep conversations with your teenager. This is when the developmentally appropriate time for them to be formulating their own opinions, their own perceptions. And so for you to be the person to guide them through these conversations is really, really important. Again, help to navigate information that they're seeing, and talk to them about the impact of seeing images and photos, videos, stories, whatever it is. Because at this age, as much as you're going to try and work to limit their social media, they're still going to see things. And so you're going to want to instill in them the ability to monitor themselves, this ability to self-monitor, on understanding, okay, this video popped up on TikTok as I'm scrolling through, and I know, because I talked to my parent about this, that this isn't good for me to watch. This is going to impact me emotionally and sit with me for a really long time. So I'm going to scroll past that one. I'm not going to watch the really graphic video. And really instilling the importance of that, because at that age, you're not monitoring them anymore. They're monitoring themselves. And at this age, it's also really important to make sure that you're not coming into conversation with biases, with your own maybe different perceptions or views. You want to be really, really open to what they have to say, because again, this is a stage of what we call individuation. This is a stage when a teen is transitioning into their own beliefs, their own values, and they might be different from yours. And that's where the validation and guiding them is really going to come through. So for smaller children, we can have this idea that children are egocentric. They think the world revolves around them. They might think this is much closer to them than it actually is, and a variety of other fears or worries that could come up that I can't think of, right? That you can't think of. And so it's important to really, really ask them, what are your fears? After you've said, what have you heard? And you learn about what they tell you, what they've heard. They tell you what they think is going on in the world, and clarify anything that you think maybe they misunderstood. Say, okay, well, what are you feeling about that? Are you scared of anything happening? How do you think that this is related to you? And being really, really open to what they have to say. Because again, they might think it's really close to them. They might think it's because of them. They might think they could have done something to change it. Or a variety of other things that we can't think of, because again, younger children's imaginations are so strong. So yeah, just a real openness to this conversation with them. Children are really, really, really good at being optimistic. Hold on to that hope with them. As an adult right now, we can maybe feel very pessimistic about everything that's going on and feel like, well, the world is just falling apart. And I'm going to encourage parents to put that at the door when they approach children with this. Allow your child the freedom to imagine a better future and to work toward a better future together. Because again, children are much better at this than we are. They can brainstorm ways that they think can be helpful. It's a very, very normal reaction to feel helplessness hopelessness in these types of situations. I know I felt it. I'm sure a lot of other adults here have felt it, especially this idea of helplessness. I feel like I can't do anything. And again, children's imaginations are so strong, so encourage them to brainstorm. That can give them some level of agency and control and feel like they can do something, make them feel a little bit more empowered. And again, children just have this really beautiful ability to, in spite of violence and hate and just awfulness in the world, they can still see peace and a resolution and coexistence and love for one another, that as adults sometimes we just lose that with time. And so really lean into that with your children. Encourage them to brainstorm so they can gather clothing, toiletries, send to different agencies. If it aligns with your values at home, say prayers together. They can raise funds if they feel like they can do like a lemonade stand on the corner to help raise some money that they feel like they could send over, writing letters, whatever it is. And you can present some of these ideas to your child, and you can also just encourage your child to brainstorm some things on their own, again, to instill some level of agency so that they feel like there is something they can do to help rather just sitting around and being sad about it. Taking breaks from screens, this is a really important one, and spending quality time together. So this is a good opportunity to take time away from the media, come together as a family. If maybe something like family dinners all together, something that doesn't happen too often, this would be a good opportunity to make something like that happen. Play games together, spend some outdoor time together, get away from being inside looking at the screens. I know that for some people, they've been just glued to social media and the news. Like they cannot stop looking at it. And if that's happening for you as an adult, that might be happening with some kids too, especially teenagers. Get stuck in kind of this doom scroll of just watching over and over and over again. And when you're outdoors and you're not inside, that can remind you to touch base with yourself, ground yourself, connect with all of your senses, and stay in tune with your body rather than just stuck in the screen. Visualization activities, different activities where kiddos can feel like they're rebuilding. So you can like take a piece of paper and tear it into a bunch of pieces, or like they drew something on it or something like that, and then paste it all back together. Or take some sort of object, of course, not a sharp object in any way, but some sort of object that can be broken into a few different pieces, and then work on rebuilding it together and talk about what it's like to build hope for the future, stay in that optimism with them, do an activity as a family, appreciate time together. Because what I always say to parents too is that being grateful is something that you have to be intentional about. That often can go unnoticed. And so you really have to be intentional about being grateful for what you do have in the moment. And you can be grateful for what you have now and feel sad for what's going on in the world. Just because you feel grateful and appreciative doesn't erase your feelings of sadness or worry for what's going on in the world. You can have both of those at the same time. Just in the same way that you can not be okay right now, be really sad, be really emotional, be overwhelmed, be scared, and be there for your child, and be there to talk to them, and be there to spend time with them. So again, you can hold things that might feel like they're opposites and hold them at the same time. That really is the extent of the slides that I was going to go through. I put my contact information here if anybody just wants to reach out with questions or wants to talk through anything, because I know that this is a really tricky topic. So I'll leave that up there for a moment, and then I guess I'll probably just end the share screen so that we can jump into some questions that were shared. Yeah, I guess that's all the info that I have on my end. Oh, Jackie, I think you're still muted.
Okay, thank you so much, Melony. That was so great. And there's so many great nuggets in there. And I look forward to also looking at the slide again about sort of really understanding like what is real news and
Yeah,
stuff. I
I
think
can
that's so
go back to
important.
those for a moment too, if that would be helpful, because we actually have a bit more time then.
Okay, and we do have some questions too. And so I went ahead and I sent those to you in the chat.
Oh, got it. Thank you so much. Um, you know what? We'll get to the slides on misinformation, I guess, if we have more time at the end. How about we do that? So I stopped the share screen just for now, and I see some questions here. What about when it's happening at UCLA or West Hills right next to the family? What if a child is scared that the war will start here, having anxiety? Yeah, that's a very valid concern. I know that there's a big up in anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. There's all of these awful events that are happening close to home right now. And it's definitely important to talk to children about that too, and clarifying the difference, because sometimes for young children, things can get a little bit mushed together. And so I think you can have a conversation about the war and how that's far away from home from us right now. Look at a map together, all the different things that we talked about, and then also have a conversation about some of the scary things that are happening here. You can talk about how, sometimes there's a lot of hate in the world. And sometimes people don't like other people and people do things to harm other people. And that could be something that's really scary to us. And I think the key here is to instill trust in your child that you will protect them. And so that's really, especially for younger children, and saying, it's my job, and you can use the word job. It's my job to make sure that you're safe and protected. And I'm going to do everything in my power to always make sure that you're safe and protected. That's something that sometimes I remind parents to tell their kiddos when they're really upset about something, like they don't want to hold their hand when they're crossing the street, and kiddo is having like a big meltdown around that. And you can remind your kids, you know what? I know that's really hard for you to be feeling right now. That's a lot of big feelings. You don't like it when I tell you to do things sometimes. Sometimes I do just have to tell you what to do. That doesn't feel good. It's my job to make sure that you're safe. And right now I have to do my job. And that feels really tough for you right now. And I have to do my job. And so it's kind of related to that conversation in a way of making sure that they know that you are there to keep them safe, and also the reality of there might be some scary things going on in the world right now, right? I want to make sure that answered your question. You can throw in a follow-up question if that didn't round it off completely. But the second part to that was, what if the child is scared that the war will start here, or having anxiety about that? That's related in the same sense. I think, again, there's a distinction between the war and the war happening, in a different part of the world, and looking at that versus some, hate crimes or uncomfortable situations that have happened here, and making a distinction between those two things. That doesn't mean war is happening here close to home next to us, and being really clear about that. And yet still saying, we're still living our lives, right? We're going to be doing the things that we're doing. We're not avoiding going to places. We're just going to keep an extra eye out. We're just going to be a little bit mindful. And let them know it's okay to be mindful and aware of your surroundings, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be living in fear to the point that you are avoiding experiences. It's about living through the experience and managing the anxiety and being mindful at the same time. How can we get our teen to stop watching social media since they are so addicted? Well, that makes me wonder if this is an addiction to social media that's specific to this conflict, and they're addicted to watching things with this conflict, or if they're just on social media all the time in general, because I think those are two separate things. If it's just being kind of like addicted, I guess, in a way, to social media in general, it's really about setting boundaries and sticking to those boundaries, because we know that you can get stuck. Adults, teens, whoever it is, can get stuck on social media, video games, whatever it is, for hours and hours and hours. And so it's about setting limits and saying, okay, when it's time for sleep, I'm taking your phone away. So they're not, because I know some teens have their phone when they go to sleep and they're like, bye mom, going to bed. And then they sit in bed and are looking at their phone until 4 o'clock in the morning, right? When really it's time to go to sleep. And so it can be, well, when it's time to go to sleep, I have to take your phone away. You're going to get it right back when you wake up in the morning. And when you set that boundary, you stick to that boundary. Because if you set it and even one time you give into it, you're basically just telling them that they just need to scream louder next time and they'll get it. Or be more loud next time and they'll get it. So that's if it's just an addiction to social media in general. If it's specifically to this conflict that they just seem to can't, like they just can't stop looking at it, it's probably because it's really bothering them. It's probably because they're really, really scared. They're probably alarmed and feeling helpless. And sometimes when we feel helpless, we feel like we just can't stop looking because that's almost our way to connect or feel like we're doing something. Like, well, I can't just go live my life and be normal while all these awful things are happening to these other people. So let me also just sit in this misery the whole time. Or I'm so scared, let me make sure I'm updating every single moment to see every single update that's coming through. And so I think if it's an addiction, again, to this conflict specifically, it's more about targeting the underlying fear that's there rather than talking about the social media, if that makes sense. Because if you target the fear or the anxiety or the feelings of helplessness directly, that's automatically going to lead to them using healthier coping skills rather than the coping skill just being sitting on social media the whole time. So you're actually having a conversation about something other than the social media in order to target the social media addiction. And usually that's kind of across the board with most of these like externalized things that happen with teens, is that they're doing one thing to cope with something else that's going on, to cope with a fear, to cope with an embarrassment, to cope with anger, whatever underlying emotion that they're experiencing. So if you target that underlying emotion, the behavior on the outside usually will kind of fix itself in a way. Let me see. The nightmares of war that keep popping up. Oh, and sorry, the other thing that I was also going to mention about that is it's not only about having the underlying conversation, but it's also about, again, informing them that watching things like this are really going to impact them. It could lead to like some really strong anxiety that bubbles up. It can lead to nightmares, staying up at night, disturbing their sleep, disturbing their eating, and actually talking to them about how much it could be impacting them. Because sometimes teens don't know that. Teens specifically think they're invincible. Oh, that's not going to happen to me, right? And so it's dispelling that a little bit. And like, I know it feels like it's not going to happen to you. It even happens to me sometimes, right? Really normalizing it for them, letting them know that even adults, this happens to. And so I can't protect you from this all the time. I can't keep your phone away from you all day, every day. I can't delete all the apps on your phone. You're just going to re-download them again. That's, unrealistic. It's more about, I want to make sure you know how much this is impacting you, so that you can monitor yourself through this process. Because with teens, that's really what you're doing. You're passing the trust along to them because they're moving towards adulthood. And you're not always going to be there to protect them. So they need to learn how to do that on their own. And this is one of those experiences. So again, first, target what's going on underneath, and then talking to them about how much it can be impacting them, and setting boundaries if you need to. Like dinner time, we're putting our phones away. We're just going to sit and eat together for an hour. We're not going to look at our phones at all. Homework time, we're just doing homework. You need your computer, like you'll use that, but I'm going to come and check and make sure you're not using social media at all. Sleep time, when it's time to go to sleep, your phone taken away, and then I give it back to you when it's time to wake up in the morning. So boundaries, addressing the underlying feeling are the most important, and then just instilling that self-monitoring within them. I hope that answered those questions. Does anybody have any like follow-up questions? I hope that really answered everything. I'll take that as a yes. Hopefully it did. I guess I'll jump in because I know we have a little bit of time and I just want to take advantage of the time if we have it. I'll reshare this screen about identifying misinformation, because I do think it's really, really important, not just for kiddos, but also for adults. So these are things that specifically I think should be talked to with tweens and with teens. And again, very specifically to this conflict that's going on in the world, and also just in general with any information that they see online. Make sure they're not just reading headlines and they're reading the whole article. We do that all the time. We know, right? And so we know our teens are doing that too. Don't just take everything in that you see as truthful. Do your own research, right? One of the most important things is not just developing an opinion or a perspective on something based only on social media, based only on a few stories that you've heard. Do some long-term education on this, like really invest if it's something that you're passionate about. And especially for teens, again, when they're formulating their own opinions and values and perspectives of the world, you can't do that just based on social media and videos. Do some long-term education, and that can be a really big learning experience for them. Seek out opinions that are ones other than your own. That's a really hard one to do, especially for adults. And you would be maybe inspired a bit that you could see teens actually do a really good job at that. And they maybe just need to be reminded and encouraged. And that also maybe could even be modeled to you, that your teen could be modeling to you as a parent. Follow or engage with people that have different lived experiences from your own. Engage with people with different conversations. I think we're in this weird phase in the world where if somebody has a different opinion from your own, you just don't talk to them. That's it. Right? Instead of, hey, we have differing opinions. That's okay. We have different perspectives. Maybe we can learn from each other. Let's have a respectful conversation and be able to say, I didn't know that. I was wrong. I learned something new. I think that piece is really the most important. And if you can model that for your child, that could be a huge experience for them to be able to witness, to say, wow, my parent can say that they were wrong, can say that they maybe made a mistake. And that can be generalized to anything. That can be generalized to any repair in the relationship between a teen and a parent. Again, ask hard questions, be able to accept hard questions, be able to accept hard answers to questions that maybe you don't want to hear, and valuing accuracy versus valuing being right. Sometimes we're guilty of that as adults. Again, not just in relation to this conversation, but just in general. We are so invested in the opinion or perspective that we have formulated that it feels like we're abandoning it. And so again, just feeling really, really, it's really important to feel like you're valuing accuracy rather than just being right. So yeah, these are a few things that I think are just important, especially for teens to talk about. And again, this is being recorded, so if anybody wants to look back on this slide, they're more than welcome. Any other questions or thoughts, reactions? I know we kind of have a small group here, so if anybody wants to shout out, they can. Or not, that's okay too.
Well, this was so great. Thank you so much, Melony. And I will definitely send out the video to everybody. And if anybody has any questions, follow-up questions, they can just reply to my email and we'll be sure to get back to them and continue to support them through this process. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And Melony, thank you so much. It was so educational.
I'm glad, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
it. Of course. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.